All right, we're
Okay.
recording. Go for it, Mike. Thanks.
All right, so my name is Mike Potter. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Rewind. We're a backup company for QuickBooks, Shopify, and BigCommerce. We're about 5 years old now. We started in 2015. We're backing up over 15,000 businesses across the 3 platforms that we back up. We're lucky these days, I guess, from the standpoint of from COVID and what's going on, in that a lot of our customers are either e-commerce customers, and so their businesses are doing well and starting to expand, or there are customers who are concerned about security, and as they move more of their data online, worried about making sure that that data is protected. And so that's, those 2 things are sort of right up our core alley. And so business for us has done really, really well. You mentioned Chronobooks earlier. We'll show you a bit. I'll show you a bit in the demo about how we're different than Chronobooks, but general idea there is kind of the same, that you're looking to back up your books and make sure that that your data is protected. And I'll walk you through why that's important in this presentation that I'm going to give to you. So with that, I think I'll get started. I'll try and I'll share my screen. Oh, I can't share my screen.
Oh, let me fix that. Does it ask for permission if you click that?
It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
That's weird. Okay, so let me see if I can fix that. Multiple participants can share simultaneously, 1 participant at a time. Event sharing options, all participants. Hey, I found it.
And there you go. That's good by me.
Does that work?
Yep.
Great.
Okay. And you should be able to see the slides.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm going to go through, rather than just go through a demo, because the demo is, let's face it, it's backup software. It's not rocket surgery. So we'll go through a talk that Kelly Parks and I gave together at QuickBooks on how you can turn data security into a competitive advantage. And we'll try and give you some tips and tricks on how to be a bit more secure, and then how to sort of enable that to win more clients. So you heard about me. I did this talk with Kelly, who's obviously not here, but we'll go through this. So we'll talk about a bit about data security and what that means, the cost of not having secure business practices and what's at stake for you and your businesses, and then how can you use that as a competitive advantage. If you want, I'll send you the slides later, but you can certainly take this quiz at any time and go through. It's just a little bit to go through. It's a few questions that basically go through how secure is your QuickBooks data. So it's asking things like how many people have access to it. Are you using a password manager? Do you have unique passwords for QuickBooks Online? Are you using something called multi-factor authentication or 2-factor authentication, which we'll go through as well. Bunch of what do you do for apps? So you were talking about that customer earlier that had a bunch of data deleted in a very short period of time, which, like you pointed out, is very unlikely that that was something that they did themselves, right? They likely, it was likely an app or potentially QuickBooks having an issue itself, but I think the more likely scenario there is some app misbehaving. And that occasionally does happen. There was an example a few years ago with one of the apps. I'll save its name for the sake of this recording, but there was an app out there that had a problem and deleted a whole bunch of attachments from invoices that they had been attaching things to. And so not only the invoices they were touching, but any invoice in your QuickBooks account. So it does happen occasionally. There are problems with third-party applications. There's a problem in that app, and it causes problems in your QuickBooks account. And so that's basically what Rewind would help protect against. So data security for us is, protecting data from intentional or accidental destruction, modification, or disclosure. intentional or accidental, we've seen not so much in the QuickBooks world, although we see this a lot in our e-commerce customers, where there are people out there who will intentionally go and try and just to cause problems in online accounts, and so they'll intentionally go in and delete data. They're purposely trying to cause problems in people's files, or in some cases their online stores. Some cases, these are business relationships that have gone bad with some of their partners and things like that. So we've seen that. We've certainly seen a lot of accidental destruction, right? We've given a couple examples already on the call today, about just people making mistakes, deleting too many things, as we said earlier. And, stuff like that just happens as people work more, and, you've got kids running in and out of your office now as you're trying to get your job done. As we've moved from the desktop into the cloud, it's allowed, certainly I think most people would agree that moving into the cloud from the desktop has really allowed a much better customer experience, like a better product in my mind. I love the fact that I can log in from anywhere and I can see all of my data. I love that I can see all those reports. I love that it integrates with a whole bunch of different apps for running our business. And the data that's on there. I love that I can manage payroll through that system as well, and it's all integrated. So there's a lot of stuff that moving to the cloud has really enabled and helped. It's enabled its own set of problems though as well, right? So data integrity. Before you had to make sure that your hard drive was fine and that there wasn't any problems with the data that you were storing on your machine. Now you don't really have you don't have that responsibility. You're putting that trust into it to make sure that they preserve their data integrity. Privacy and data protection becomes more of an issue as your data is now in the cloud. You need to make sure that that you're protecting that data because it's more accessible to other people, and that opens it up to threats like data breaches or malicious attacks and losing data and things like that. But generally, like I said, I think the pros outweigh the cons of running it on desktop or versus online. And so it's really important to, as you moved from a desktop environment where you were controlling the data and managing it, and you've now moved into a cloud environment where it's up and people have access to it, it's really important that as accountants and bookkeepers, you establish a data security policy to make sure that your clients know that you're taking their data seriously and you're doing everything you can to make sure that the data that's being loaded in QuickBooks Online is secure. And so that is things like securing your passwords. So you should not let your web browser store or remember your passwords. It's not a completely secure system. If somebody gets access to your computer, they could get access to your passwords. We do recommend using a password manager instead. And so even with a password manager, I have to log on to my computer, but I still have to log into my password manager, and those passwords could be different. So that is a second sort of security model for the password manager. And I'm not going to go into the security of a password manager and why it's better to put all of your passwords into one application than managing them all in some other way. But their security has been vetted, and it absolutely is a very secure system. So we recommend something like 1Password. I'll actually go through that in a bit with you. I'll show you how easy it is to log in. But if you're using something like 1Password or LastPass, other password managers, that's a good solution. What you really want to make sure, right, is that the password that you're using for QuickBooks Online is not the same password that you're using for any of your other online accounts. That's the main thing that you have to make sure. So that if somebody gets access, I always give Adobe as the example because it's a really popular website, and B, one of the largest breaches in history. And so if you were using the same password as you were in QuickBooks, as you were with your Adobe account, as those people got access to the Adobe passwords, they're going through a bunch of different websites and just trying the username and password combination in all these different accounts. So if you had been using the same password for Adobe as you had been for QuickBooks Online, guaranteed your account would have been accessed by that. So you really want to make sure you're using a different password in each application. And then the easiest way to do that is to use this password manager. The other thing we recommend is enabling what we call two-factor authentication. So you might have seen this sometimes, but when you log into a site, sometimes you get a text message to your phone, and it'll be normally a 6-digit number that they text to your phone. And so you enter in your username, you enter in your password, and then on the next screen, they actually ask you to enter in this two-factor authentication code. And that's highly recommended. We really recommend that you use that on any application where it's available. So it's available in QuickBooks Online. I can show you how to do that. It's available in Google and all of your popular email clients. It's available on most of your banking applications as well. And so whenever that's available, we really do recommend. So that way, even if someone somehow gets access to your password, they don't have access to your phone. And so that second code, that second factor is needed to log in. And I just logged into QuickBooks before starting this. So we'll see if it prompts me to demo it or not, but I'll show you how to enable that in just a second. And then obviously, third-party app integrations is a big part of QuickBooks Online, right? I mean, that's one of the main reasons why people move to QBO from the desktop, is they want to integrate with all these different third-party apps. So before you do that, you really should just just take a quick second to review the permissions that the app is requesting, make sure that the company is reliable. Review the permissions, meaning if they're asking for read and write permission, they also have access to delete things. So just be careful about that. Some apps do need the ability to write data, and they also end up with the ability to delete something. But if the app that you're installing doesn't seem to need the permissions that it's requesting, you might want to question why that is. Why are they asking for the ability to read and write invoices if they're not touching invoices, for instance? Anything where they can read and write, if they have a problem in their system, they've got the ability to delete it and really cause havoc in your file. So take a few seconds and just review the permissions from an app perspective. Make sure that it's a trustworthy app. Make sure that, does the company have a number, like a 1-800 number that they can be contacted in? What happens when you call that number? Is their privacy policy up to date? The one that my business partner, James, really likes to do is, what's the copyright year on their website, right? Like, is it 2020 or is it 2017? Gives you a sense of like how serious are they taking their application. So before you install those third-party apps, you really should just do a little bit of investigation just to make sure that you trust the company before you give them access to your data, because those things can really cause problems in your account. At the end of the day, we also recommend you back up your data. And so it's important to note what QuickBooks backs up and what they don't back up. And so if you read anything online, if you go to the QuickBooks support site and you look up, does QuickBooks back up my data? They'll write, yeah, we absolutely back up your data. Every change that you make is captured, and then a copy of that data is stored in multiple places throughout the world. Unfortunately, you can't restore your file back to a particular point in time. So although they call it a backup, I think it's a bit disingenuous to call it a backup. It's really more of a copy of your file. They have a copy of your file, and if something were to happen to their system, they could restore that copy, the way it was. So if overnight something happens, a meteor comes and hits their server, they have a backup of that, and they'd be able to restore it back to the way it was. But you can't go into your file and restore particular items or restore your file back to a particular point in time. Okay, and so if you have this problem like we had before where somebody goes in and they've deleted a whole bunch of transactions, you can't undo that. And you can't call QuickBooks Online in order to undo that. You have to rebuild the file, as you guys have pointed out. You have to rebuild that file manually. So that's what Rewind does, is Rewind takes a backup of your QuickBooks Online account and allows you to restore your file or a particular aspect of your file back to a particular point in time. And I'll give you a demo of how we do that in just a few minutes. We recommend using a VPN. So I'm actually connected to a VPN right now, which is always my reminder to maybe disconnect from it. So we do recommend a VPN when you're working remotely. It just blocks anyone using the same internet network from seeing what you're doing and the data that you're working with. And so, if you're going to work out of a coffee shop or something like that, it's best practice that you'd use a VPN, and there are lots of VPNs that are very user-friendly, and that could be used by basically anybody. So have a look, lots of options out there. We don't have any one that we recommend. The one that we use is a bit more technical, but absolutely should be using a VPN. And then you've got these 5 aspects of data protection, right? So passwords, 2-factor authentication, making sure the apps are legitimate, backing up your data and using a VPN. Those are 5 things that a lot of other people don't do. And so you should document that. You should communicate that to your team, your customers, your potential customers. Because by doing this, you're really making sure that they know you take their data seriously. And you're doing everything you can to keep their data safe. And that's really important because a lot of people don't do that, and a lot of people don't inform the customers about how they're doing that. And so it gives that customer a refreshing or reassuring feeling that you're taking good care of them, that you're doing everything you can to make sure that in case something does go wrong, it's really not anything that that you could have prevented, because you've taken all of these steps in order to securely host their data and work with their data. So in terms of the cost of not having those secure relationships or those secure business practices, you're threatening your relationship with your clients. And I'll tell you, like we had an example probably a few years ago now, where we were using a bookkeeper here in Ottawa to do our payroll. And QBO, I think it was only an issue in Canada, because I believe the Canadian and American payroll systems are different. But the payroll in Canada didn't get run. There was a problem with QuickBooks Online. But the bookkeeping company was the ones who recommended QuickBooks Online. So when it came time to sort of assign blame from our perspective of who was responsible for us not getting paid or our employees not getting paid, it went back on that bookkeeping business. So we didn't look at QuickBooks and say, well, that was QuickBooks' fault. This was the company that had recommended QuickBooks, and it said that this was a really dependable payroll system. So if there's something that happens and you've recommended, QuickBooks Online, and something happens to their data, or you've recommended a certain app and it ends up causing a problem, you should just be aware that it's very likely that the clients are going to look at it like it's your problem, not it's QuickBooks Online's problem or it's this other app's problem. You're the one that came in and recommended it. So, the relationships that you have with your clients are at risk. Your reputation is at risk from a business perspective. And then you were talking earlier about time and how much time it was taking to, clean up. But then obviously that time is either costing the clients money or it's costing you money, and that you could be spending it with new clients. And then this is when Kelly would normally take over in the presentation that we're doing this year at QuickBooks Connect, and she would talk about this. So I'm going to give the best Kelly impression I can, which isn't very good. But this really can be a competitive advantage, because it's often overlooked by other people who are in this area. And so what you really can do is you can document these policies that you've got. You can promote them to your clients, your potential clients, and use this as a competitive advantage. And this link that's here, that you'll get these slides, but this link is actually a link to Kelly's document that outlines her security policies. And she said you could take that as an example of how you would write a security policy that you would publish on your website, so your clients and potential clients can see how you're protecting their data. So you can use that example and then build out that document. And I believe here, yeah, so it talks about the 5 steps that go into, documenting that and then selling it basically to the clients, right? So you want to make sure that you implement the practices that we've talked about, and then you document them. Her last bullet point there, don't get too technical and make it digestible, I think is really important, right? So you want to make sure that you're speaking at a level that your clients can understand. Introduce that policy to your client. So in an in-person meeting, she has it on her website posted as well. I believe it's part of her onboarding process. even to make sure that her clients understand what she's doing to protect their data and what she expects of her clients to protect the data. Sell it and price it, right? So, that last bullet point I think is really good. You already have an advantage by presenting this policy because most people are not doing this. So this really can increase the amount that you're charging for your services because this really is a differentiator against a lot of the other people that are out there. Educate the client through onboarding. So as I mentioned, she's got this as part of her onboarding, which I think is really important. But the other thing is that there are parts of this that are the client's responsibility as well, right? So that notion of using a secure password and making sure that the password is not being duplicated, and then using that two-factor authentication. If your clients have access to QuickBooks Online, you want to make sure that they know those two things as well, right? And even using a VPN would probably be a good one for them as well. So it's not just how you're protecting their data, but you're also putting the onus on the client to make sure they understand what to do and how they can then improve their security in working with this data online. And then lastly, continuing to update that policy as technology changes, as you add new apps into your arsenal, continue to update that policy and make sure that your clients are up to date with what you're doing with best practices. If something comes around that's better than two-factor authentication with a unique password, then you're making sure they know about that, etc. But this really positions you as a bit of a data expert or online data expert, and like Kelly's done, I think really positions you to increase the rates and sell more to your clients. So just those 5 things again, right? So securing your passwords, enabling two-factor authentication, reviewing third-party app. This is review third-party app permissions. It's really around vetting the app and making sure that those apps are ones that you want to install into QuickBooks Online. Backing up your data and using a VPN when working remotely. You implement those 5 things and you've done everything you can to protect the data that they've got online. So I'll stop there and just see if anybody has any questions on any of that.
Looking good so far to me. Any questions from anyone? Keeping an eye on the chat.
Okay, so I'll show you an example here of a bunch of that. I'll actually go through QuickBooks as well, and I'll show you how to enable that on your QuickBooks Online account. So maybe I'll just refresh my screens here and make sure that
great,
everything's going to work correctly. Okay, so I think I'm good. Now you can see on the left-hand side, you can see Rewind on the left and QuickBooks on the right, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll show you how 1Password works because that's sort of the easiest one here. I'm just gonna get rid of this thing. So there's a little browser integration here. And you can see it comes up, as soon as I click on it, it comes up. And if I actually use the shortcut, it'll also come up. So I've just clicked on my keyboard. Oh, something's going on with my computer here as it's going. I can hear it. So if I do a quick search for Rewind, it should, well, you can see it's automatically filled this in, but it's actually not the right password.
I have a question while you're doing that.
Yeah.
So I see that you're using 1Password to log into Rewind, but of course there's also the sign in with Google and sign in with Intuit at the top of the screen.
Yeah.
For security purposes, is it okay to use your Intuit sign in for Rewind, or do you recommend that Rewind have its own credentials?
I think we'd recommend you can sign in with Intuit. We actually recommend to all of our employees that whenever they can sign in with Google, that they do that. It's a little bit easier. So the reason we do that is it's a little bit easier for us to manage their accounts, for one. So when you sign in with Google, at least you're able to see, from an administrator perspective, you're able to see all the applications that that person signed into. And then you're also able to, if somebody leaves, so if you let somebody go or if somebody quits, you can just go into Google and disable their access. And that's one of the advantages for us for signing in with Google, is it's a little bit easier when people leave. And then the other thing we can do is we can enforce two-factor authentication on their Google account. And so we can make sure that that they've got two-factor authentication enabled, and then that way they don't need to enable it on Rewind. They've actually got it enabled on their Google account. Intuit's a bit different because it doesn't have that same sort of administration stuff. But if you've enabled two-factor authentication on your Intuit account, you've got a unique, strong password with your Intuit account. It's absolutely fine that you sign in with Intuit rather than using a Rewind account. So I'm going to go ahead and just sign in here. You can see we've got a nice password for that demo account. And this is Rewind on the left. So you can see it's automatically logged me in, and it's logged us into our Shopify account first. So I'm just going to switch us over to the Rewind account. And at Rewind, we're pretty lucky because we do a lot of work with Walt Disney. So the example I'm going to walk you through today is an example with selling stuff to Walt Disney Corporation. So you can see, you can easily search the vault. So we've got a really super fast searching mechanism. So if you knew you had something that was related to Disney, you could easily just search it. You can see we've got an invoice there. We've got a customer. We've actually got a few invoices for them as well. So if you know the name, or you know something that's in the item that you're trying to rewind or trying to restore, you can easily search the vault and find it. You can easily filter as well. So we said, actually, I know I'm looking for a bunch of journal entries, for instance. You can find journal entries. If you know when those journal entries were edited, you can actually say, I'm looking for the journal entries that were edited between the 1st of February and the last of February. You can see in this case, I actually have none of them in that date range. And you can just, I'll reset that filter. There you go. So we'll get back to everything. So you can easily filter things out if you need to find certain things that you've deleted or that you've changed. If you know exactly what you need to do, you can search for it really easily. And the way Rewind works is when you first install it, it goes in and it takes a copy of all of your QuickBooks data, and it stores it in what we call the Rewind Vault, which is what we're looking at here. And then anytime you make a change to any of the items that we're tracking or that are in your QuickBooks account, actually, we store a new version for that particular item. So in this case, we have an invoice here. You can see it's invoice 1003, which is the one I've got on the right-hand side in QBO. And we have a whole bunch of versions for this invoice. You can see I've got one from earlier today where I was just checking to make sure everything was working properly. I've got a bunch from May 6th and May 1st, April 28th, going back to March 27th. This is a pretty popular account for us. December 10th, we were at QuickBooks Connect, so you'll see a bunch of them throughout that day. And anytime the invoice is changed, Rewind is tracking those changes. And you can see in this case, the current invoice is for $101.70, which is shown here. Current versions on the left-hand side, the selected versions on the right-hand side. So this one is $101.07. And if I go back to the previous version, that was from May 6th, 2020, so just a couple weeks ago, you can see the balance due is $33.90. And I can easily restore back to that one version. So what's unique about Rewind, as opposed to ChronoBooks, which was mentioned, or even your QuickBooks desktop backups that you used to have, is that you can actually restore one item at a time without affecting anything else. And so if I restore this version of this invoice, the only thing that this restore is going to touch is this invoice. It's not going to affect any other transactions that were imported from May 6th to now. It's not going to affect any other invoices that we've created from May 6th to now. If we've added any, it's not going to affect any journal entries that we've put into QuickBooks Online between May 6th and now. It's only going to touch this invoice. So I'm going to go back, I'll do that. You can see restoring this invoice may also affect dependent accounts, classes, company currencies, customers. So if there are dependent items that this invoice will change, we will obviously change those. But it's essentially saying, restore this invoice back to the way it was on May the 6th, 2020. And so this one is currently $101.70. And if you remember, we're changing it back to $33.90. So that's in progress. It doesn't take very long. We refresh the page on the right. It might take 1 or 2. There you go, it worked really quickly. And so now you can see the invoice is changed. It's $33.90 instead. And so now we've got this, this $33.90 one. And you know, as always with any type of backup, you can say, actually, I didn't mean to do that. I don't know why I rewound that to $30. I actually want to go back to the one that's $101.70 because Walt Disney's got a lot of money. Maybe not these days, but they certainly have more than we do. And so we should be selling them 2 Mickey Mouse ears instead of the 1, or maybe it's 3, I forget. If you rewind that back to $101.70, so in this case, you're kind of going forward, you can see we're selling them 2 of them now at $45 each, and it's back to $101.70. So that's restoring one item at a time. It's you know, the same way if you wanted to restore a customer, for instance, you can go in and find the versions of the customers. In this case, this customer hasn't been edited. They've only been, we only have the 1 version for them, so I can't rewind that. See if customer number 1 is any different. No. But you know, if you had journal entries, for instance, that you wanted to restore back to the way they were or whatever, you can easily restore them. So that's restoring one item at a time. You know exactly the problem that you've got, and you're trying to undo that problem. You know exactly the item that it touched. This is the way to go. In some cases, you don't necessarily know the item that's causing a problem, but you know the type of item that's causing a problem. And that's where advanced restore comes in. So you said, okay, I know my journal entries are causing a problem here. I was working on my journal entries last Sunday, for instance, and I totally messed them up. I don't know what I did, but I've really messed up my journal entries. So I'm going to want to rewind my journal entries back to the way they were on May the 10th, and you can pick whatever time works well, right? So let's say it's 1:20 in the morning. And what this is going to do is it'll restore your journal entries to the way they were on May the 10th at 1:20 in the morning, but it will not touch anything else. So any other work that you've done between May 10th and today will be preserved. You won't actually lose any of that work. You're only going to change your journal entries without affecting anything else. And you can go through and you can click restore items. I'm not going to do it because it takes some time. You can click restore items and it'll restore those journal entries back to the way they were May the 10th. You can pick whatever items you want on there. And most of these items are being done what we call automatically, so we don't get involved. Now there are certain ones in here where we still inject Rewind's expertise into the process. So we'll take them over and we'll do them manually. And the reason we're doing that is just to make sure that that we're doing enough restores where we're confident in the automatic version of them. So I think in this case, journal entries are going to go, and if I restore them, it's going to go fine. But just be aware that if you're using this on a production account, it may not be instant. We may have to get one of our developers in to just watch the restore. We always make sure that we err on the side of making sure the data is correct as opposed to doing it quickly. So for now, there's still some things where we do them manually, but this one I think we do automatically. And of course, you know, in some cases, you really don't know what the problem is. You're like, look, I don't know. I know this file was good on May the 7th. That's the last time I know. I don't know. The client came in. We talked earlier about the client came in and did some stuff. It's always the client that causes the problems. The client came in and messed things up. And I know they came in on May the 8th. So I want to restore this back to May the 7th. And so let's restore this back on May the 7th. You click the restore items. that'll send, they'll kick off a process where we'll go and restore this account. Like I said, with some things, there's still some manual process, so it takes just a little bit of time, but within a day, we'll get back to you and we'll restore that account to the way it was on May the 7th. Okay, so that's restoring data. Like I say, you can do it one by one by going into each individual item. You can go into advanced restore and do one type of item, or you can do all items. And then the other thing that we're working on right now is we're actually just about to open up a beta for what we call copy data. And I don't think I can show it to you here because we only have one account still in our demo. But basically, this is the ability to take a backup and then restore it into another file, into another QuickBooks Online account. So you might use this if you were looking to downgrade QBO files, if you were looking to potentially onboard new bookkeepers or new team members. You didn't want them working on the production account. You wanted to set up a test account for them. You could do that as well. So this is coming soon. We should have this out in the middle of June for everybody to start using. So we're just going through some final testing on these to make sure that the copies are going right. So far, so good. And we should be launching that in about a month's time. And that's all there is to show for Rewind, to be honest with you. I was going to show you one last thing in QuickBooks Online and where to set up that two-factor authentication. So I'm going to do that now. So it's on your Intuit account. And they call it two-step verification. And you can see that that's currently on with what's called an authenticator app, which means rather than texting me codes, I'm actually using 1Password to generate them. But you can easily, if that's off for you, you just hit the edit button and go through the process for verifying. And you can turn it on. They'll send you a text message to your cell phone, and that's really all you need to do. The app makes it slightly easier because you don't need a text message. You just get codes generated. But that's where you would enable two-factor authentication on your QuickBooks account here. And that's it. So any questions on anything we talked about?
Looks great to me.
Yep, super simple. I love it.
What about pricing? Can you tell us about the pricing?
Yeah, good question. So pricing is $5 per file per month. So it's based on how many files we're backing up. So for backups, it's $5 per file per month. There's a minimum of $10 a month. So if you've got one file, it's $10 a month, but otherwise it's $5 for each file that we're backing up. The copy, we haven't worked out the pricing for copy just yet. So copy, when we launch, copy might be included in that. We might be pricing it differently. We don't really know just yet how we're going to price it. But the backup product is $5 per file per month.
Great.
Yeah, you talked about ease of use. I think we benefited from starting in Shopify. That was the first platform that we backed up 5 years ago when we first launched Rewind. We launched Rewind for Shopify first. And the nice thing about that is that most of the people using Shopify are small business owners, small, medium-sized business owners, and very non-technical. So we've really tried to build a product that is, that's really easy to use, that anybody can use. It's hopefully it looks nice, it looks clean. We put a lot of effort into the usability of the product and how it looks. And so it's really, I think right from the start, we've had to build something that's really easy to use because we wanted people to be able to help themselves without having to rely on us to do the restores for them.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, back to pricing for just a second. So as pro advisors, if we're wholesaling our customer accounts, I can see how the $5 per month would be super easy to spread over each account. What if what if the customer is paying for their own subscription? Is it basically then, and they need to put it on their you know, and be billed themselves for it. So would it be basically $10 a month
Yeah.
for them then?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, and you can bill them whatever you want. Like you can bill them the 5, you can bill them the 10. It's up to you. We've got clients that are doing both. We've got some that are including the cost in their monthly packages. We've got some clients that are selling it at the $10 retail price.
Mhm.
And so it's really up to you. We don't we don't judge on how people want to try and monetize this product. If you want to try and make some money off of it, that's great.
Right.
If you want to take the cost in, that's fine. But yeah, if the client signs up on their own and they're just backing up that one account, then
Mhm.
they're paying 10.
Mhm.
And pro advisors and accountants and bookkeepers are paying $5 for
Okay.
multiple accounts per month.
Perfect. Thanks.
Fantastic. Any other questions? I saw Janice joined us after you'd already started.
Hey, Janice.
Yeah, I had technical difficulties. So anyway, yeah, I have a question about Shopify. If I might be interested in that later. Do you have a tutorial about how that works with how Rewind works with Shopify?
Yeah, so Rewind with Shopify is actually exactly the same as Rewind for QuickBooks.
Okay.
And so same thing, you can install Rewind from the Shopify App Store. You get a list of all of the items in a similar way. If you want to restore one item at a time, you can find like this product, for instance, and you can see the product. I'm not quite sure why that one doesn't look like it's backed up. Let's see if we can find another product in there. Sorry, I went back too far. Let's see these paints. No, pants aren't in there either. I don't know what if I can find one with multiple products here. I think I've got a product number 8 actually. I do not. Might be thinking of a different account, but anyway, same sort of thing. You should be able to see the versions down here on what's been backed up. And then you can, oh, sorry, that's a different account that we're no longer using. I thought this was my regular backup account. Anyway, same idea. You can restore one version at a time. You can go to advanced restore and you can restore all of your products back to a certain date and time, or you can restore the entire store back to the same date and time. And it's also got a copy feature as well. So it's really the same thing from a QuickBooks perspective as a Shopify perspective. It's exactly the same way. One item at a time or multiple items, and you do it exactly the same way. And if you ever have any problems, in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got our little chat where support is always answering questions. So you can search our articles or you can chat with support if you ever need any help in the bottom right-hand corner.
Okay, great,
Thank
thank you.
Mike, do you have phone support available?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so we have a 1-800 number as well that you can call, 1-855-5-REWIND.
Perfect.
And you can talk to somebody if you'd like to do that instead. Sometimes that's a little easier, especially if the restores are complicated. Sometimes our support team will actually prompt to get onto a phone call, and just
Great.
if we're going back and forth like that, we'll prompt to get onto a phone call. And occasionally we'll even bring the developers in who are working on the restore to talk to them, to talk to whoever it is, the customer, to make sure that, we're restoring the data the way that they want it to be restored. So sometimes we like to talk to them just to understand what the problem is or what they think the problem is or what might have caused it. Then we can look around, we can see if that sort of jives with what we're seeing. And like I said, that's sort of right now us injecting us into this process just until we automate it to make sure that the data is going back correctly.
Excellent, thanks. Sometimes I have to talk in a circle before I really come up with the question I need to ask. And sometimes when the only support available is chat,
Yeah.
I just am like, I don't even know how to ask this question.
Right.
So that's perfect.
Yeah, sometimes it takes longer, right, to go back and forth by email or chat or whatever. It's just easier to get on a phone call and say, okay, here's what I think happened. I don't know what, maybe you don't know what our wording is, right? You don't know what restore is or rewinding, or look, all I know is my file was fine last Sunday. Now there's a problem. What do I do?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Any other questions, Heather or Lori? I'm keeping an eye on the chat in case Lori posts something.
Okay.
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 I think that that's a pretty good summary. And it sounds like a great product. And oh, Lori says couldn't find the chat. There we go. Fantastic. So, oh, she says everything sounds good to me. Everyone else asked my questions first, so we're all good. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Lori. Well, wonderful. Well, generally we go from about 12:30 to 2, and you know the standard meeting format is a little up and down right now since we don't have any in-person element to it. Often we'll start off with a little bit of an introduction to the group, and we did the introductions of the people who are here today before. But yeah, I think maybe at this point, if we're kind of feeling solid on the rewind side of things, it might be nice to just do a little bit of a member check-in and like hear a little bit more on how everyone is doing amidst the current stuff going on in the world. And Mike, you are welcome to stick around for that discussion, or if you want to get going, we thank you for your time.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Absolutely. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer them anytime. But thanks, Ingrid. And I'll send the slide deck to you so you can send it around.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Mike.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.
Great.
You too. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.